Hello and welcome to Muse Jam Session recording, I believe 193. My name is Dani Beaumont. I am traveling this week. I'm actually on the East Coast instead of the West Coast, and I got in the mood for a little bit of holiday winter wonderland. Nothing particular religious, but just enjoying the winter weather. So welcome to the Winter Wonderland Muse Jam. In this session, I want to focus on just power tips and tricks for responsive design. When I was at Adobe Max, I put a number of our more advanced Muse designers to the test and had them teach a number of best practices sessions on working with Muse, tips and tricks. And I've stolen a couple of those ideas from those kind folks, one of which is Ollie Pordelli, who's joining us here today. And I just wanted to kind of step through them. So I've got about 7 tips. Last time I did this, I only got through 5 or 6 of 20, I think. So I think 7 sounds about right. I'm going to go ahead and dive in. But as usual, if you have questions as we go along, go ahead and put them in the chat pod. Ollie will probably give me a hand and answer the ones that he can. He also has microphone support, although he's shy. So Ollie, you're welcome to turn on your mic at any time and just let me know if there are questions that are specific to what I'm showing as we go along. So I'm going to check that quick. In fact, Ollie, you are officially in charge of you are in charge of chat. So I'm going to ignore it, and you're going to pipe in with the audio if you hear any questions that I should pay attention to. Feature number 1, understanding pinning, browser responsive and fluid. So this one actually is a masterful piece of work from Ollie Pordelli. I had asked him at Max when he was teaching best practices for responsive design if there was a good way to really better teach how pinning works. And he did that for me. So I'm going to go ahead and click over to a live page that I have. I could probably zoom out on this and it'll still work. Let's do that. So in the world of pinning, let's go over to Muse as well. And I'm just going to make life simple here and just create a blank page so I don't wreck anything. So as you're working, when you place objects on the canvas, depending on the type of object they are, you have different fluid features, basically. So different abilities to define how objects resize. If I came in and gave this object a reasonable color, it's not too painful. It's kind of painful. So I just have a container that I've drawn here. You have the ability to resize objects in this resize dropdown and then pin objects. Now I know for myself, it took me quite some time to really get my head around the pinning behaviors that we offer. Before responsive was in our world, we had this first set of pins, and these relate specifically to the browser position. So if I were to place an object here, let's say, this distance down and this distance in from this corner here, what that is indicating is that I'm pinning this object in a fixed distance from the browser edge. So even in the world of responsive, you want to think of it almost as a crowbar versus a rubber band. That crowbar is going to always remain that fixed distance from that corner of the browser. And this pinning interface is basically indicating when you pin any object that it will be that fixed distance from the upper left, right, lower left and right, and then the middle points of the browser window. So very browser specific. The next set of pins are really speaking about the behavior of objects within fluid breakpoints as you resize that breakpoint and how it behaves. So there's the ability to pin to the left-hand side, the right-hand side, and the center. There's also the lack of pinning, or pretty much nothing pinned, which is pretty interesting and amazing, I think. So let's kind of look at these different pinning techniques in the example that Ollie gave us. So what you'll notice, and this is it's a great example, there's a lot here that's kind of worth defining, and you're welcome to grab this URL. I'm going to come on in and grab it for you real quick and put it into the chat. Because I think it's really handy if you tend to teach Muse or just want to get your head around it. I think this is a pretty handy page. So what Ollie defined here is this is indicating the pin that's applied to this object. I believe that the blue pins are the pins that are browser related. As I scroll down, there are red pins. Notice that it's that middle pin. He's got this icon to represent that. Now, when we talked about browser level pinning, the rule there is that it's not going to ever move. It is pinned like you stuck a pin in it. It is actually firmly planted. So notice that this image here is pinned in relationship to the upper corner of the browser. What Ollie's got is an overlay here. So he's actually overlaying another layer of elements on top, but those pinned objects are remaining fixed in their location in relationship to the pin position. So notice I have an object here that's pinned. I've got one here that's pinned. If I take the browser width and I press and drag it, notice a couple things are happening. The center of the browser will always be, in essence, 50% of the width of the browser. So that center is moving as the browser width moves. Notice that this object is not getting any closer to the center. It is getting closer, it seems, to this edge because the overall width of the page is reducing. This object is remaining fixed in that corner, this object fixed in the other corner. And as Ollie indicates here, there's the page center. As I scroll down on the page and we get away from browser level pinning to more responsive pinning, there's different behaviors. So the first object here is pinned to the center of the browser. It's going to be redundant to this type of pin. So he could have put this guy right here on the center for all intents and purposes. He's got it off to the side, but that lets you see what it's pinned to. These two objects, this one here, the browser pinning versus the responsive pinning, you would think it would be the same behavior, and it mostly is. The only difference is that objects that are pinned to the responsive behavior, they're going to move up and down. They're going to move vertically on the page, but horizontally, they're pinned. So it's these guys right here will never move, and these guys do move vertically and not horizontally. Notice that I've got an object here that's pinned to the center, so it really emulates this object here. If I kind of try to get both of these in view and I extend things out, notice they're both emulating the same behavior. So this one's a little further over to the left, but it's not moving at all. As I go ahead and spread out here, its distance is remaining fixed to that browser center. Keep on going down here, and I have a different form of pinning here. So this object, notice that it's not pinned at all, and it's placed on the page. So if I come out here a little bit larger, as I move the object, and we're going to talk about this non-pin situation. In the world of responsive design, when you don't pin objects and you don't define their responsive behavior, interesting things happen. But as I press and drag along here, notice that it really is almost the same behavior. So this guy right here, it's pinned to the center of the browser. This one is not pinned, so it is actually behaving as though it is pinned. Is anybody getting confused yet? I know, I'm saying the same things a lot. But notice that it is moving over. Let's just keep going and kind of show a little more examples. So this guy is pinned to the center, this one pinned to the center. And although the overall page is moving, everything's staying in relationship to that center. As we come on down, we've got objects that are pinned to the left-hand side using that responsive pin there. And notice that even if I make this browser bigger, that one is not moving versus the object that is not pinned at all. The rule that you want to keep in mind for objects that are not pinned or do not have responsive width or height are using something known as percentage-based layout or percentage-based design. So this object is going to basically look at the overall width of the browser and move in a percentage base in relationship to the width of that browser. Sometimes words just escape certain concepts. As I come along here, I've got pinned objects to the right-hand side. So this is a fixed behavior versus this one is more of a percentage based. See how this width is reducing? That's because it's not pinned. It's moving basically in relationship to the width of the browser. As I come on down even lower on the page, I get a little bit of repetition for what's at the top of the page. this object is pinned in relationship to the corner, this one to the center, and this one to the right. Now, I know that I personally will use this as a reference as I try to explain different pinning behaviors. In this session today, we may or may not get into too much more details about pinning, but I think just understanding really why do we have two sets of pins and what's the fundamental behavior is helpful. All right. That is number one. Number two, in the winter wonderland, as we get a little bit more wintry, is copy and paste with breakpoints to repeat their layouts. And this one's kind of magical. Let's see what I want to do here. So I'm going to jump over into my Muse design, and we'll jump out for a second. Let's see. You'll notice that I have a contact form here. This, again, was from Ollie's presentation. Thank you very much. When you work in Muse and you build out responsive layouts, it can take you a ton of time to get an object, a widget, or just a layout of text and images to be exactly the way you want it on multiple breakpoints. You also may find that you want to use the same types of breakpoints on different pages. And the Muse engineers made a pretty conscious decision. It's a little odd. It takes some learning around how breakpoints behave on master page items and how they are when you duplicate pages. So in this design, if I came out to just my site plan and I added a neutral page here. So if I came in and just added a page down here below and double clicked on it, notice that I have one big breakpoint. It's 1150. And then I've got these little triangles. We call them fangs on the Muse team. Fangs, which is a little more Halloween October than Christmas Wonderland. So let's just call them hanging icicles in this example. The icicles are reflecting breakpoints that are defined on the master page. So they are not actually here on this page. But what it allows you to do is almost as though you had a knife. You can slice off the top of your page and the footer, the bottom of your page, and define how your navigation on top and bottom should be handled independent of your active page content. So if I go out to that master page and take a look, notice I have two breakpoints. I've got the largest 1150, got another one at 16 at 670. And that is what is being reflected on my page. Now, I don't have design content here, so it's hard to get a lot of meaning out of that. But this could be my hamburger menu for mobile design, and then my larger layout could be for desktop devices. And I could have navigation there at the top of the page. As you're working, you may come into an individual page, and you may set a number of breakpoints for, let's say, tablet, smartphone, and desktop, or some of the column layout that you have. So if you have a 3-column layout for desktop and then a 2-column for tablet, you'll adjust your objects to kind of fit within that column behavior, that grid structure. And you may want to quickly go in and apply those same breakpoints to other pages without having to go in and manually take out a piece of paper, write down what you've done for breakpoints, and copy them over. You also may want to, when you're working with widgets or design elements, once you've defined their multiple breakpoint layouts, you may want to reuse that easily. And there's some tricks to doing that. So you'll notice I have a contact form here. And if I jump out to the largest breakpoint, one tip I'm also a big fan of is as you're jumping between breakpoints, if you select an object, let's say you want to compare it or look at it across different breakpoints, it can be kind of clumsy, especially when you have two breakpoints that are so close together like these two are here. Notice I've got two close boxes there. I'm a big fan of hitting Shift and then either Control or Command if you're on a Mac or a PC. So for me, it's Shift Command 6, which goes to the next largest breakpoint, or Shift Command 5, which goes to the next smallest breakpoint. So with this object selected here, I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift Command 5, which takes me to the next smallest breakpoint. Notice that my design changed. These buttons, because there's not really room for them on the right-hand side, are now towards the bottom of the form. I'm going to hit Shift Command 5 again to go to my smallest breakpoint, and notice that my form has been adjusted for this breakpoint, and it's in good shape. The design is nice and tight. I like the way it looks. Now, if I want to take this form and bring it to an entirely different page or an entirely different site, I can come in and select the form, and I'll just come on in and copy it to the clipboard. And if I jump back out to my site plan and onto a page, notice that there's nothing here as far as breakpoints go. There's nothing, there's no master page applied here. There's no individual page attributes, no breakpoints that have been added to the design. In fact, the original design here is 960. If I go ahead and right click and I say paste, I get that contact form in its smallest breakpoint, that phone layout that I selected from the other page. But what I didn't get is the tablet layout and the desktop layout. If I go ahead and delete that, let's do it one more time. So I don't have to copy it to the clipboard again, but when I right click to paste, I want to select not paste in place. I want to select paste and create breakpoints. So I can basically say, go ahead and bring it over. If there are breakpoints on the original page, I want you to create them here. And also, if I've customized this component, this widget, I want you to bring that over with it as well. Now, kind of by design here, I want you to notice that this is a 960 size page. That is not a size from the page I'm copying from. So just take note of the behavior here. If I come in and say paste and create breakpoints, Muse comes in and it creates, for me, maybe we did have 960. I don't think we did. So it creates the largest breakpoint, 1125, actually second largest. If I jump back out a little bit larger, I can see the one where the items here, the buttons are on the right-hand side. I'll go a little smaller to the second breakpoint. Now you may notice that things may or may not center horizontally. That's kind of depending on how you place those in. There's not the idea of paste in place with breakpoints. That's kind of one command menu item a little too far. The other nuance here is when you do paste these items, if, for example, you have a contact form that's much lower down on the page as it would be on a phone layout because the text above it might be skinnier, we're going to remember its original location. And when you jump to those other breakpoints, you may find that items are just in a different location vertically as you look at the design. That's kind of by design because we're remembering where it was positioned in the copy state and we're reflecting that in the paste state. So as I continue on in here, I'll go to, let's see, the next smallest. So we've got that 960 breakpoint. Now, if you remember, we didn't have 960 in our original copy instance, but it's on the page that I pasted into. What I would do in this case is go ahead and delete the 960 instance because I don't really want that. I don't want to reflect a breakpoint that isn't in the original one that I copied from. But I've got my nice phone layout here in the smaller instance. I've got my tablet layout. And then if I jump out, I've got my much larger breakpoint where it's side by side. So that first example was simply how you can, when you copy an item, if there are breakpoints inherent with them, you can copy and paste them. Now, another just shortcut in life, if you're dealing with the world of responsive design and breakpoints, let's go to another page here. And this page doesn't have anything. It does have a master that is being reflected, and I can see that with my, what did we call them? We called them low-hanging icicles. So the icicles from the master are here, but there are no other breakpoints being represented. Let's say I don't really want to bring over anything complicated. I really just want to bring over the breakpoints from another page. I can do that by going to that other page. So let's say I jump over here again. I'm going to just try to exaggerate this for a moment. I'm going to come on in and I'm just going to draw a dumb old rectangle. And we'll make it a beautiful shade of terrible blue. So all I have is one little object. I don't care what it is. Could be text, could be an image, anything. I'm going to come in and copy that. Or I may even cut it because I don't really want it here. And when I jump over to that new page, when I right click, I can say paste and create breakpoints. And then it can delete the object that I used. So it's almost a way to just really easily carry that over. The objects that you bring onto the canvas do not matter. It's just that act of pasting with breakpoints that's going to create them for you. All right, let's look at another world here. when it comes to breakpoints and retaining them. As you're working as a designer, let's say you get this contact form perfect. You love the way it looks, and you want to be able to easily reuse it. We're in an interesting place when it comes to libraries in Muse. We kind of got a lot of libraries going on, and many of them are legacy. We're looking to optimize them going forward in 2017. But for the moment, we have the idea of a widget library. We also have what's known as a library. So if I bring up the library, it's something that I can use personally on files. Widget developers like Cookie and Muse Themes, Muse Gain, all of those folks, when they deliver widgets to you, they usually install in the library panel. But this is a place that you can add any element that you have. It could just be graphic elements, text. It doesn't have to be a widget. When you drag objects or copy objects over into the library, you can include those breakpoints that might be defined with that item. So let's say I want to bring this form over with me. I'll come in and select it. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click and select Add to Library. And I'll go ahead and put it in the Dani Shuttle library. This is one I use just to kind of shuttle things back and forth. So I'll go ahead and I'll call it Pretty Form. How about Winter Form? And now if I jump out to my untitled page, notice that this untitled page, as we know, has no breakpoints, has nothing really with it. If I come in to select that form that I've just put there and press and drag it on the canvas, it comes over, but it comes over in a sad sort of way. It comes over without any of the additional layouts, any of the breakpoints that I defined. I'll delete that. And this time when I select Winter Form, I'm going to go and select from this multi-breakpoint, cute little icon here, and press and drag that into place. And now when it comes over, go ahead and align that a little bit better horizontally. When it comes over with the breakpoints and the layout for that widget in each of those breakpoints. Now you can also do this to some extent with the Creative Cloud. The CC Library Nuance, we're in need of this idea that says, go ahead and drag it out with breakpoints or drag it out without breakpoints. We need to engineer that. That's up to the Muse team. But so I've got Dani working here for a moment. This is kind of my Scratch Creative Cloud Library folder. If I were to add this object, let's go ahead and do it here onto the page. And I'll go ahead and give it a name. I think we call that Winter Form. The little tricky part here is, and let's go ahead and show this. I'm going to delete this out, and I'm going to delete all of the pre-existing breakpoints. So I have that one largest breakpoint. If I come in and I grab this same form from CC Libraries, and I press it onto the canvas, that sad state happens again. I don't get all of the lovely breakpoints that I would like to have, right? It came over in that one state. The reason for that is when you're dealing with Creative Cloud Libraries, you do need to make sure that the page you are dragging onto already has the breakpoints that were defined in the page it's coming from. How's that for complicated? So the way I could do that in 2 steps would be to come on back here, draw that silly rectangle this time, cut it onto the clipboard, go back to this other page, and paste and create breakpoints. So there's that silly rectangle. Notice I now have all the same breakpoints from that original page. I'm going to delete those different items. And now when I press this Winter Form onto the canvas, I get my form. And if the winter gods are with me, when I jump to the smaller breakpoints, I'm getting those layouts for that contact form as well. So if you're watching a recording, you may want to go back and look at those again. But you can work with libraries, Creative Cloud Libraries. You can easily copy and paste between pages to apply any of the breakpoints you might have defined. The last way I would say that you can go on in there and make your life work well is, let's say I really like the breakpoints on this page and I want to change its content. I can always right-click and say duplicate the page. It will duplicate all of the breakpoints. I can then delete the active page content and go further from there. Okay, number 2, down. Next in the Winter Wonderland scene, Library and Creative Cloud Library. We're 2 down, in fact. So we've got copy and paste with breakpoints to repeat layouts. And we've got the Library and Creative Cloud Library, multi-breakpoint elements. So if you can say it, you know how to do it now. Next up, create a responsive header by grouping elements. This is another Ali Pordelli special. Let's go ahead and change this view back to the normal one. Here's how it goes. The more time you spend with Muse, the more you bump into some cute little tricks. I think that's true, but Ollie definitely bumps into some really good tricks. So he showed me this one at Max. Notice my layout here, following the lovely winter theme. We have walking in a winter wonderland. And I've got a background image that I've applied here. Now, because it's an image, I don't want it to necessarily, there's 2 ways you can resize objects. And let me kind of show that for a moment. For the background element here, I can say, go ahead and just make it a responsive width item. And when you have background views, this tends to be appropriate. So what happens is as I press and drag now, if this is going to cooperate, let's just see. I've got an overlay shadow on here. This is where I get to blame Ollie for things that aren't the way I expect. So I'm going to select both the tint. He put a gray color to darken it up, or maybe I did, I forget, and the image. I'm going to change the image and the overlay to be responsive width, such that when I press and drag now, notice what happens. It's a little jumpy, but notice that the image height is not changing. Let's go ahead and preview this in the browser. The image height is not changing, but the image width is changing to adjust to the size of the page. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this just to kind of drive it home a little bit. Now I've got this image content here. Let's move my lovely face down to just that point because I want to prove a point. We'll consider that a ruler. As I press and drag, well, maybe I'm not proving my point. I'm going to check and see. Jam sessions aren't jam sessions unless I end up surprised at least once or twice. I'm going to come in. Let's just keep life simple. And I'm going to grab that image directly. Because I really want to explain this pretty clearly. All right, I've got an image that's here. I'm going to go ahead and place it in a couple ways. So it's a background fill. And notice if I come into this object, I refuse to believe the demo gods are going to be mean to me today. All right. The first image instance here, I'm going to set it to responsive width. The second one, I'd like it to be responsive width and height. Let's just preview this page. And as I get smaller, notice the difference in the behavior, right? The one towards the top is exemplifying responsive width only, right? So if this were a full width image and the browser got smaller, it would stay a fixed height. The one below it is proportionate height and width. Okay, that's really cool. But Muse has kind of the lack of an ability to, when you're setting text or objects, to align them not only to center, but to be centered width and height. I'm just going to talk funny today, I think. Trying to be clear, but I think I'm confusing. Let's go back to our example. So now that I've belabored that first point, let's get this guy back in here. We're in pretty good shape. And notice in this first breakpoint, when I come in to preview my page, I kind of like the fact that my image is not going to stay fixed in its height, because as it gets smaller, it gets to be really pretty heavy. So notice that as the width of the browser grows smaller, the overall image is scaling both height and width, which is really great. But I get this problem where my headline that I want to remain centered in that header, see how it's migrating down in a really annoying way until I get to the next breakpoint. So I really don't want this behavior. The Ali Pordelli super trick of the day is if you come on into this object, interestingly enough, you create a container. I'm going to go ahead and show my edges here because it's going to be a pretty invisible container. I'm just going to kind of draw it off on the side so that we can see it. And I'm going to move it up into position here. And I'll reduce it so that it basically sits just on top of the text that's below it. Now that container that I've just drawn, it's just an empty container. I want to make sure in its resize option, I tell it to be responsive in both width and height. The next thing I want to do is come on in and select the text that's below it. Let's make this pretty simple. I'm going to ungroup anything that's here. I'll go ahead and select all three of these objects, and in the Align panel, make sure they're all centered on one another. And then with the three selected, I'm going to go ahead and group them. Now when I preview it in the browser, this is not something I'm necessarily proud of because it's a kind of a missing feature in Muse right now. But if the gods are deciding to cooperate with me, notice that now when I start with a much wider page, look at the percentage distance of walking here in relationship to the top of the image. It should remain overall centered. And as I resize, notice how that text is nicely just staying centered both horizontally and vertically. So the way we're doing that, because he taught me, the way we're doing that is to come on in and draw that container, group it with the other objects, and you'll get that percentage-based scaling of location in height in addition to width. All right, Ollie, if that question is for me, you let me know. It's probably just praise for how clever you are, which we all already know, but can't hurt giving you that praise again. Okay. Next up. Tip number 5. Defining consistent text container heights with background fills. All right. I spent a lot of time this summer working with the new responsive feature set and kind of wrestling it to the ground and talking to the engineers a lot to try to determine if I was doing the right thing. And I discovered this bit of oddness in Muse that you may or may not be aware of. I'm going to slide on down on the page here. And I have some text boxes that are here. And inside the text boxes, inside the images, I have some text laid on top of them. And what I want to have is this nice cube behavior. So you'll notice that the cube here is a state button. And the state button is set to be responsive in width. So that as the width of this site grows smaller, this should be about 1/3 of the page, no matter how wide that page is. And in it, I have some text. I have 3 text boxes. Now, when I go in and preview this page in the browser, kind of a mysterious, odd thing happens. So I'm coming along here, and everybody's looking really good. And this is 1/3 of the page, 1/3 of the page, and 1/3 of the page. And the text inside of it has been set to be fluid width. So as the width of the page reduces, the text is going to flow into a more and more narrow container and get taller and taller. So I can press and drag here, and everything's going really well. It's doing what I would expect. The text is flowing. I know it's a little hard to see here on the Grand Place in Belgium, but this is only a demo. So as I get to a certain point, notice that I've got text over here. I'm going to get close to my next breakpoint, but kind of bad things start to happen. See this thing right here? It seems like they're broken and they're falling apart as I come along here. And it can be frustrating. It's not easy to understand why that's happening. What I've learned is that this text container has more text than these guys. And as it grows, it starts to break the layout. So the way to overcome that is to look at what your greatest, your tallest text container is, and make sure that the other objects are that same size. So if I look in the transform panel, they're a width of 300 and a height of 300. I'm going to want to click in here and just make sure all three of these are set to about the same height. And now, notice that I've got that container here and here. Now when I preview in the browser, if the demo gods want to cooperate, I can come on down on that page. Maybe they aren't going to cooperate. Let's just see. Huh. So what I would do is, it may need a little bit more exaggerating. Let me take away a little bit of text here. So you may need to find that you have a little more leeway, a little more gap here in your text as you draw out the container. Preview it one more time. See if we hit it. All right, so now I'm pretty good. I can go out to my largest breakpoint. The world's going to cooperate. As I come in, I should jump to the next breakpoint. Maybe I'm not good. All right. The Wonderland gods are being mean. What I would suggest is, if this happens to you, look at the containers, play around with them a little bit, see if the text containers are all the same. And if not, try to adjust those so that they are, because that's usually the culprit and why that's seeming to break. Really, it is. I swear it. Okay. What do we got next? Number 6. It's those demo gods again, man. Let's go back. Vertical move handle and align keys for quick layout. I like these a lot. So if I were on this page and I wanted to try to work with the content in the smaller breakpoint, what I'm going to tend to do here is go on in and add that breakpoint. So I've got one here. And just to make things break in a beautiful way, I'm going to go ahead and select all of this content. And I'm going to ask that it copy the text formatting to the smaller breakpoint. So any text attributes are going to be the same between the two breakpoints. I'm also going to come in and copy size and position to that smaller breakpoint. So I'm going to basically have a lot of content that's too big for where I'm headed. I'm going to now jump to that smaller breakpoint. And I could see I've got stuff going on here. So I may decide, you know what, I want to go ahead and go with a single column design. This 2 and 3 column is just too much for a phone layout. So I want to do something smaller, and I want to do it rather quickly. Not sure what that guy is. I'm going to make it go away. But there are some power tools, some ways that you can work easily with long, thin documents now that we support responsive design. So for that, we introduced something known as the vertical move handle. Notice that when I select any object here on the canvas, over on the left-hand side, there's this elusive little handle here. Now, if I double-click that handle, it's going to select everything from that point in the design all the way down to the bottom of the page. Inversely, if I just select one object and instead of clicking, I press and drag, it's going to just almost like a knife cut right through the middle of the page and move my content down for me on the page. So the vertical move handle is really helpful there. As I'm working, I can come on in. Let's say I want to move these guys out. I'm going to move this guy down. And I might want to move this content down on the page as well. So I'll come on in and I'm going to take my line on the side here. This is kind of a good old-fashioned Muse line behavior. I'll go to the stroke area, and instead of stroking on a side, I'm going to go ahead and stroke the bottom. And I'll make this more of a a wide, thin line. And I'll center that guy and move it out a bit. Now, the magic kind of comes with the way you select and move content here. I know that I want this block of stuff to be the full width of my page. And I can go on in and manually do it, but trying to make this object and this object the same exact height, the same exact width, especially if you have a lot of tiles or little groups of objects, can be pretty painful. So one nice way to work is as you come in and select objects, just kind of be a little bit more aware of your selection state. So when I select one object, I get little control handles here that allow me to resize that object. If I select more than one object, notice that I have those 4 control handles, or actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 handles. But in addition to the standard object handles, I also have these diamonds, and those are group selection tools. When I work with a group, I can apply the resizing attributes to everything within that group. What I want to do here is make everybody a little bit wider to adjust to the width here of my page. So I'm going to kind of come on up here and just set it where I want the beginning point to be. And now what I can do, I'm going to grab not the individual handle for this text container. I'm going to grab the triangle, which is the group selection handle. And then I'm going to hold down a modifier key. You'll want to play around with this yourself. And then if you download a Muse keyboard shortcut guide, you can kind of see all of the permutations here. But if I go ahead and press and drag this guy, notice what it's doing. It's resizing all of the objects. And it's also changing, think of this as percentage scaling. It's changing the gap between those objects in its appropriate percentage as well. The next time I do this, though, instead of grabbing, I'm going to go ahead and grab that group selection tool. Instead of holding no modifier keys, I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac, and I'm going to press and drag. Notice what it's doing. It's basically saying, let's adjust the distance between these objects without actually changing the resize attributes. As you work, you'll see there are different games you can play in bulk to just adjust your design as you're moving on here. If I hit Shift and Option and resize a little bit, nothing really too dramatic happens there. Let's try Shift Command and resize. And let's try just straight up Shift. So what I would do on this guy as I were working is I would go on in and I'd go ahead and resize it until my containers are starting to fit where I want them for that single design. And then I'll go in and grab that second set and I'll move it down below it. Let's get my line out of the way using the vertical move handle. And get that guy in a little bit better shape. I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick. If I go out and search for Adobe Muse keyboard shortcuts, and I want to just grab that link and throw it into chat. Because I think there's a lot of value. There's some really nice hidden gems there around things like I showed you, moving to the smallest and largest breakpoint in the design, and then adjusting those elements as you're working. Okay, moving right along. Responsive menus using built-in Muse options. We're kind of getting towards the end of the hour, but let's take a look at these. As responsive design came around and as the world of mobile design came around, there were a lot of questions in the community about how to create mobile menus, things like hamburger menus as they're known, or just push menus, responsive menus. So I went ahead and I created a document that shows that off a lot. So if I come on in here and we jump to the Muse responsive menus, and let's just go in, let me go to the live page here. So if I go to menus, actually, I always get that wrong. So muse-menus.businesscatalyst.com. I'll put that in the chat as well. If you're watching a YouTube recording, I will put this in the recording notes to make your life a little easier. But this is a nice sampler set of different menus that you can achieve using built-in Muse features. So folks like Ali Pordelli and some of the other vendors have done a really good job of creating third-party widgets for some of the more popular mobile menu scenarios. This is using native Muse, nothing outside the application, but different approaches you can take. So what you'll notice is at the bottom here, I have 6 examples, and you can just come in and download the source file if you want to tear it apart, customize it, reuse it, have at it. It's my pleasure. I learned from folks in the community, and I'm sharing that learning one more time. But you'll notice each of these examples. So if I click on example 1, I'm calling it hamburger push, which says that if I click here, I have, in essence, an accordion menu that pushes the content down. It's pretty subtle, but when I close it, notice everything pushes out of the way, and I can access my navigation here. Kind of inversely, if I jump to the other extreme, that same accordion can be pinned to the bottom of the site, believe it or not, and push up as far as content goes. So notice I have a really thin bar here at the bottom with a little show indicator. When I click there, the menu pushes up on the page and allows me to access its navigation and such. Inversely, I can hit hide and it's going to move back down again. So that's the same accordion widget with content placed inside the pane, the panel for that accordion, and it's pinned to the bottom of the site. I got to bring it up now to get to my next options. If I go to number 2, we've got hamburger reveal. And this one, it's just a rollover. When I roll over the hamburger, I can see these navigation options. And then in all honesty, I can click to close it out or just roll out and it goes away. Third example is using the lightbox. Lightboxes are magical in that they have one feature that, again, Muse kind of lacks. It's the feature we talked about when we were looking at the text in the headline image. And that feature allows you to say that anything you place in a lightbox will always remain centered both in height and width, horizontal and vertical, no matter the size of the browser. So notice that I've got this nicely centered menu. This is a manual menu that I placed inside a lightbox. And again, if you want to see how I did it, go ahead and download the asset. There's also a closed box that I pulled here. But notice as I press and drag the edge of my browser, I can simulate a small phone layout, a tablet layout. Notice that it's not only staying centered vertically. Obviously, I have trouble with horizontal and vertical. It's not only staying horizontally centered, which is pretty standard, but the vertical centering is working as well. I can come on in now and close that lightbox out. Vertical reveal, this is just kind of cute. So this is basically using a trigger target widget. And in the transition, it's using a vertical transition instead of the standard just fade or horizontal transition. And what's the last one here? Anchor scroll. This is interestingly popular, not popular, but having this idea that you have a trigger here or an anchor link, a hyperlink, that when you click it, takes you to where your navigation might exist. So I could jump to another page here. I could jump back up to the top. But just using anchors, you'll see that for navigation techniques. So these are all ways that as you move into responsive design, you can have an easier time building out the navigation. All right, I have filled up most of our time. I want to go ahead and stop and see. Shy little Ali Pordelli has not bumped into my presentation even once, but he's going to turn his audio on now and tell me how it's gone with chat and if there's any questions that I can answer for folks. Hello, Ali Pordelli.
Hi, Dani. Hi, everybody. Not really. Nobody's asking any questions.
They're all in awe.
Yeah. Right. Someone asked something about nesting widgets, and yeah, you can definitely nest widgets into one another. You can place your accordion inside the composition widget, the lightbox, and actually the trigger too. But just watch for the height, because if the height gets taller than a specific, amount, it depends on the composition widget. It probably just pushes everything down in the composition, and you end up with some unwanted gaps. So yeah, but accordion inside a composition widget lightbox is not really a good idea for, yeah.
Yeah, I've tried it. Accordion inside a Lightbox is kind of one hill too far, one road too far. There are, if you're, we're about to take a winter break, which takes me to my last slide, probably my favorite. I zoom out a little bit. Maybe not. Okay. So my last slide, which is thank you very much for a fantastic 2016. If you are a real Muse aficionado and you want to know what we're going to do for 2017, it isn't there yet, but in a couple days, if you go to the private pre-release, so museprerelease.com, there's a quick little rough cut video where I and some other Muse team members talk about our plans for 2017, just to kind of set expectations a little bit. I'm excited about the new year, and I am going to be taking off after Tuesday of next week for the rest of the year, so it's pretty close. What I am going to do is go ahead and put up a poll again. Let me know how this session met your expectations. If it fell below your expectations, you have to tell me in chat why, or else I don't learn how to make it better. Roughly speaking, though, thank you everyone for all of your loyalty, all of your time with the Muse tool in 2016. It's been an incredible year when you really realize that responsive design didn't even exist until February of this year, and that we did that, and then we rolled back in scroll effects for fixed breakpoints. We've bitten off a huge bite of capabilities. I think that 2017 will be a time to really refine that feature set, really make it more stable, easier for new users, but really leverage what we've done in the last months of this year. So thank you everyone for your time. I will see you in the new year. Keep an eye on Facebook and the events page of the microsite to check out new topics. If you want to see something covered that you haven't seen in a while, go ahead and shoot me an email at dani@adobe.com or put it in the Facebook comments. We look at that as well. You can add it to your comments here as well. We'll probably start from the top in the new year and make the rounds again. So thank you, Ollie, so much for coming, and thank you, everyone. We'll catch you in the new year.
Anytime.